Hey everyone, I'm out in our garden right now actually, and as you can see, it's a nice summer day here in Japan. Summer's just getting started. Actually, we're in the rainy season right now, but you can't tell today. It's just really nice weather, so thought I'd come outside and do our little video update out here. But actually, one of the things I wanted to show you was our garden we've got going on here. We started planting a garden. And one of the plants that we're planting is a cucumber plant. Cucumbers are big here. They love to make kind of pickle out of them. So we're growing some cucumber vines, which are these guys here. And cucumbers, they grow in a vine along a trellis that I had to build up for this. And the reason I want to show you guys these is I'm in the middle of reading a book right now that a friend of mine in America recommended a while back, and finally getting around to it. But the book's called The Trellis and the Vine. And I think it really, I'm about halfway through, but I've really been encouraged by the perspective of church ministry that the authors have. And I think it really would be something that would be very helpful in Japanese ministry in particular. The basic idea is that it kind of divides church ministry into two types of ministry, the trellis work and the vine work. And the idea of a trellis is that it's meant to support the vine. The point is the vine, the plant. If you have a beautiful trellis, but no plant growing on it, or a weak plant that's not healthy, the trellis isn't really serving its purpose. Really what you want is a really flourishing vine and a trellis that supports that. And the authors use that metaphor to describe the two types of church ministry, where it talks about vine work as being like the actual gospel work of the church, of proclaiming the gospel and discipling believers and speaking the gospel to one another and helping each other grow in your faith and evangelizing and seeing not the number of the people in the church growing, but the gospel spreading and people growing in faith, and through that more people coming to Christ, and obviously the result will be more people in the church, Lord willing. And then it describes the trellis work as being the ministries that we actually do in order to accomplish those things and to support those works, like meeting together in a church building on Sunday, putting on events and hosting Bible studies, serving on committees and doing different things within the church. And so it kind of divides the work into the two of those. And again, both of them are necessary works. But it then describes a danger where a lot of churches can have this focus where they maybe started off focusing on the vine work, but as time went on, their time and their energy, and they're spending more time maintaining the trellis and not seeing a lot of growth in the spiritual area. And that's something that was, I think, really convicting for me to read about. And it's something I see happening in a lot of churches, not just in Japan, in America as well. But particularly here, one of the things in the book that I was talking about that I think is particularly applicable to ministry here in Japan is it mentions that a lot of times there's this divide in people's mind where they think of the pastor as being the one who's supposed to do all of the vine work, and the congregation, they do the trellis work. So the pastor's the one who disciples people, who preaches the gospel, who evangelizes, who actually speaks the words of God and actually tells people, and encourages people. Whereas the church members, they don't have to really do that as much. They are involved in committees, and they try and support that work that's going on. They attend Bible studies, they attend the church service, and they try and maintain all the programs and the events that the church does, but they don't get really involved in the actual speaking of the gospel to each other and to other people, and discipling and evangelism, and that sort of falls off. They leave that on the hands of the pastor. And that's an attitude that I think is very prevalent here in Japan, partially because of the culture of that they have here. They feel like you have to be trained and specialized in something, and so the pastor is the one who's trained and specialized in this sort of ministry. So he's the one who does it, and then the people in the church, they're involved on the committees, and they serve and support. And so I see that very clearly here. But what the book challenges us to think is to sort of shift that mindset from as leaders and as missionaries or pastors in church, not to be just the one that does all of the actual gospel work, but to be someone who leads the congregation in doing that. That we train up the congregation to also be involved in speaking the gospel to each other and reading the Bible together, and sharing the gospel with their neighbors. And so that takes away, maybe from some of the opportunities that we as leaders might have to personally do that work. But if we can lead the entire congregation to sharing in it, it just increases the effectiveness and the ability to see the gospel grow and flourish in our church, in our neighborhoods, in our cities, in an exponential way that one pastor could never do on his own. And particularly, I think for here in rural Japan, that's something that's very key, because there's many churches that don't have a pastor, and so they have just a few members in a congregation. And again, with that attitude being so prevalent, I feel like these churches, it's almost like they can't do anything without a pastor, because they don't have someone to train them and to teach them and to help them. And again, with that attitude of being, oh well, we're not educated or trained, or we don't have the specialty to serve in that pastoral role, a lot of these churches are struggling pretty heavily. Particularly the church in Ofunata that I've talked to you guys about before. We've gone and visited there a number of times, and it's an area that God's really put on our heart to possibly go and serve in the future. Their church with only 2 members and no pastor. And so that's one of the things that, if we did wind up there, we'd really love to see a ministry starting where we can help those 2 members grow in their faith and be able to go out and be involved in more discipleship and evangelism. We'd love to see new people coming into the church and those new people growing as well, so that they can minister to one another and to their communities. And then, even beyond that, one of the things that I've been thinking, really getting ahead of myself here, because we don't even know if we're going to be going there for sure. But that's one of the areas that God's put in our hearts. But, we want to see ultimately a Japanese pastor to be able to come and to shepherd that congregation, that flock, and lead them in this kind of ministry on a long-term basis. But Ofunata, it's a very small town. It's in rural Japan. It's a very small church. They might not even be able to afford to pay a pastor. I mean, certainly right now they can't, and you'd have to grow enormously for them to get to the point where financially they could afford that. But there's many churches in Japan like that, and so the odds of them getting a new Japanese pastor fresh out of seminary to say, oh, I'm going to go to Ofunato, this small little city on the coast, it seems very small to see that happen, and that's one of the reasons they've been struggling to find a pastor for so long. But I would love to see something we'd be praying about. I'd love to see God raise up a pastor from that city, so whether it be one of those few existing members of the church, or a new person who comes in and who's saved and is discipled within the church. I'd really be praying to see God raise up a leader from that city to come and become a member of that church, to serve that church, and eventually to pastor that church. So that's something that recently I've been thinking about. And again, that's way down the road, but something you guys can definitely be praying about. Thank you guys so much for all the prayers and the support that you've offered to us. We're excited to see the ways that God's working. We're excited to see what He's going to be doing in the future. A couple of quick things that we're going through, that we're involved with right now. Like I said, I'm going to be speaking at a pastor's meeting next month. That'll be my first time doing that, so pray that I can present clearly some of these concepts in Japanese and in a way that really gets these other pastors excited about applying these principles to their own churches and maybe seeing some growth through that. The following month in August, I'm going to be preaching at another church in the prefecture. I'll probably be giving the same sermon that I gave last time, so this will be my 3rd time getting to preach my forgiveness sermon, so hopefully each time I'll get a little bit better. And then in September, I'm going to be preaching at our home church again, so I got to come up with a new sermon for that. Again, all of this is in Japanese, so it takes me way longer to do all this stuff than it normally would, so I'm trying to get as much of a head start as I can, even though it's a couple months away. So please be praying for me as I prepare for these speaking opportunities. And we just thank you guys again so much for all you've done for us and all your prayers and support over the past 3.5 years we've been in Japan, and even longer as we've been preparing to get here. We're just so overjoyed to have you partnering with us, and to know that we're not here alone, that God has brought you into this ministry with us, and we're just glad to be able to get opportunities to share some of the things that are going on over here. So please keep reading our newsletters. We'd love to hear back from you guys, and yeah, keep an eye on the website. We'll try and post some more videos like this in the future as well, and again, let you know what we're thinking and what God's doing. So thank you so much, and God bless. See you later.